Welcome to AKC's Story Loom. Please don't forget to subscribe, share, and comment, and turn on your post notification button as your support means a whole lot to me.
Now let's get right into the story. Princess Aurelia of Eldoria was a vision spun from myth, a living embodiment of beauty so profound it made bards weep and sculptors abandon their chisels in despair of ever capturing its essence. Her hair cascaded like molten gold, her eyes shimmered with the verdant fire of emeralds, and her skin, luminous as moonlight on fresh snow, seemed to defy the very concept of imperfection. She knew she was beautiful. More than that, she believed, with an unwavering conviction that bordered on divine truth, that she was the most beautiful girl on earth. This belief was not merely an opinion, it was the foundation of her existence, the very air she breathed. Born into luxury, shielded from hardship, and praised from her first breath, Aurelia's heart had become a flawless, unyielding crystal, reflecting all light, yet absorbing none. Empathy, kindness, humility, these were concepts as foreign to her as the squalor of a peasant's hovel. Her world revolved around her own exquisite reflection, and everyone else existed merely to admire it. Thus, when the grand procession of suitors began, Aurelia viewed it not as an opportunity for companionship or alliance, but as a grand stage for her own unparalleled performance. From across the known world they came, young Prince Alaric, whose kingdom boasted vast forests and a lineage stretching back 1,000 years, Senator Valerius's son, Cassian, a scholar with eyes that held the wisdom of ancient scrolls and a gentle, earnest demeanor, and even President Dumont's heir, Bastien, a strapping frontiersman whose rugged charm had won battles and hearts alike. Each arrived with lavish gifts, chests of shimmering jewels, rare beasts from distant lands, and treaties promising peace and prosperity. But Aurelia saw only their flaws, magnified by the lens of her own perceived perfection. "Prince Alaric," she'd declare, her voice dripping with mock sympathy, "your kingdom may be ancient, but your nose, it's rather Roman for my taste. I prefer something more refined, like a Grecian column, perhaps." Alaric, his face burning crimson, would be escorted out, his gifts left untouched. Cassian, the scholar, once dared to offer her a rare, illuminated manuscript. Aurelia picked it up between two fingers, as if it were contaminated. "Words, words, words," she'd sighed, letting it drop to the polished marble floor. "My beauty requires no such intellectual adornment. And frankly, your spectacles give you the air of a perpetually startled owl." Cassian, a man of quiet dignity, simply bowed and left, the rustle of his retreating robes the only sound in the stunned hall. Bastien, the frontiersman, dared to speak of adventure and shared journeys. Aurelia merely laughed, a sharp, brittle sound that grated on the nerves. "Adventure? My dear man, my life is the adventure. And frankly, your hands, so calloused. I fear they'd scratch my delicate skin. I prefer hands that have never known anything rougher than a silk glove." Bastien, for all his bravery, could only stare, utterly defeated. Her father, King Theron, a kindly monarch who loved his daughter dearly despite her severe flaws, watched these spectacles with a heavy heart. "Aurelia," he'd plead, his voice barely a whisper, "you wound these young men. You insult their families, their nations. How will you ever find a suitable match with such a spirit?" Aurelia would merely tilt her perfect head, her emerald eyes glittering with self-satisfaction. "Father, the suitable match will be the one who finally matches me. And so far, they are all just suitable for each other. Not for me." What Aurelia did not know, could not even conceive, was that her boundless arrogance was not merely an inconvenience to her father or a humiliation to her suitors. It was a poison seeping into the very fabric of Eldoria. Deep within the ancient, whispering woods that embraced the kingdom, where the roots of forgotten trees stretched into primordial earth, dwelt the spirits of the land. These were not benevolent sprites or whimsical fairies, they were the ancient consciousness of the earth, the silent guardians of balance and respect. They had watched the rise and fall of kingdoms, the ebb and flow of tides, and the myriad expressions of humanity. And they were, for the first time in centuries, truly, profoundly offended. Aurelia's cruelty, her incessant mockery, her utter disdain for the very concept of human connection, resonated as a discordant shriek through their ethereal realm. Each tear shed by a rejected suitor, each gasp of humiliation, each broken heart, sent ripples of indignation through the ancient forest. Their patience, which stretched for eons, was finally wearing thin. On a night when the moon was a mere sliver and the stars seemed to hide their faces, a great tremor ran through the ancient wood. From the gnarled roots of the eldest trees, from the still depths of forgotten springs, from the very dust of the earth, 200 shadowy figures began to stir. They were not demons in the crude sense of fire and brimstone, but rather the personified wrath of nature, the collective fury of abused balance. Their forms were fluid, shifting, barely visible in the oppressive darkness, their whispers like the rustling of dead leaves in a forgotten wind. Their anger, a cold, implacable force, swelled and surged. They had witnessed enough. The princess's pride had not just insulted mortals, it had defiled the sacred harmony of the land itself. Justice, or perhaps, a profound lesson, was due. With a silent, terrifying will, the 200 entities began to move, drawn together by a singular, consuming purpose. Their forms blurred, coalescing, folding in upon themselves, until they became a swirling vortex of primal shadow. The air grew heavy, charged with an unseen power. And from the heart of this ominous maelstrom, a singular, magnificent form began to take shape, a being of exquisite, captivating beauty, crafted from pure malice and the boundless ire of the spirits. His eyes, though presently veiled, held the depth of twilight, and his nascent smile promised both intoxicating wonder and ultimate destruction. He was coming. And Aurelia, in her crystalline tower of pride, was utterly oblivious to the tempest she had conjured. The morning after the spirit's furious coalescence, an unusual hush fell over the kingdom of Eldoria. The birds sang with a muted melody, the air felt strangely still, and even the sun, usually so vibrant, seemed a shade less brilliant. It was as if the very world held its breath, awaiting an unseen arrival. And then, he appeared. He simply was. Not arriving by carriage, nor on horseback, but materializing in the bustling heart of the village square, amidst the morning market's clamor. He was tall, impossibly graceful, with a bearing that spoke of ancient kings and forgotten realms. His skin was flawless, touched with an ethereal pallor, and his hair, the color of midnight, framed a face of exquisite, impossible beauty. His features were sculpted with a precision that defied nature, his lips a perfect bow, and his cheekbones sharp, aristocratic. But it was his eyes that truly captivated, deep pools of a shifting, unnameable color, like twilight bleeding into dawn, hinting at untold stories and fathomless depths. A hushed silence spread through the market. Merchants paused mid-bargain, villagers stopped their chatter, and children, usually so boisterous, stared with wide, unblinking eyes. He moved with an effortless grace, his dark cloak swirling around him as if caught by an invisible breeze. He gave no name, offered no explanation for his presence. He simply observed, a faint, almost imperceptible smile playing on his lips, as if he knew a secret the world was yet to learn. Whispers began to ripple through the crowd like wind through tall grass. Who is he? Where did he come from? Such beauty! I've never seen his like. The name that settled upon him, murmured from awestruck lips, was Kale. It sounded like a breath, a sigh, a promise. News of the mysterious stranger, Kale, spread through Eldoria with the speed of wildfire. Every maiden in the village dreamed of catching his eye. Every young man felt a strange mixture of awe and inexplicable envy. Even the most cynical elders spoke of his allure with a curious reverence. This unprecedented commotion eventually reached the gilded halls of the palace, finally piercing the carefully constructed bubble of Princess Aurelia's self-absorption. She was in her private chambers, meticulously admiring a new gown spun from silver thread, when her most trusted lady-in-waiting, Eldoria, burst in, her face flushed with excitement. "Your Royal Highness!" Eldoria practically gasped, forgetting all decorum. There's a man in the village. He's magnificent. Like no one you've ever seen." Aurelia, who had long ago tired of tales of handsome princes, merely arched a perfect brow. Magnificent, Eldoria. Are you quite well? All men are merely pale imitations of the ideal, and that ideal, as you well know, resides here. She gestured vaguely at herself. No, princess, truly. Eldoria insisted, her eyes still wide with wonder. He's different. He doesn't boast, he doesn't preen. He just, is. The entire village is transfixed. He's called Kale. Aurelia felt a flicker of something she rarely experienced, curiosity. And perhaps, a tiny, almost imperceptible prick of challenge. Could there truly be someone whose presence could overshadow hers, even for a moment? It seemed impossible. She scoffed, but a seed had been planted. Very well, Eldoria. Lead me to this paragon. I shall grant him the honor of witnessing true beauty. She swept out of her chambers, her ladies-in-waiting scurrying to follow, a shimmering procession of silk and jewels. As she approached the village square, she could feel the shift in the atmosphere. A palpable energy, a sense of anticipation, hung in the air. The crowd was thicker now, a silent, reverent circle around a single figure. Then, she saw him. Kale stood near the central fountain, his profile to her, gazing at the water with an air of detached contemplation. He was indeed breathtaking. His dark hair fell perfectly, his posture was regal without being arrogant, and the subtle lines of his jaw were impossibly sharp. But it wasn't just his physical perfection that struck her. It was the aura that surrounded him, a quiet power, a deep mystery, a complete lack of any desire for attention, yet drawing all eyes to him effortlessly. As if sensing her presence, Kale slowly turned. Their eyes met. For Aurelia, it was as if the world tilted on its axis. The vibrant colors of the market faded, the murmurs of the crowd dissolved into a distant hum. All that remained was Kale's gaze. His eyes, those astonishing depths of shifting twilight, held hers with an intensity that bypassed her intellect and went straight to a place within her that she had never known existed. It was not admiration she saw there, nor lust, nor even the fear that usually accompanied her presence. It was something else entirely, a profound recognition, a subtle challenge, and a chilling sense of being utterly seen. Her carefully constructed fortress of pride, which had repelled princes and shamed senators, began to develop the first hairline cracks. For the first time in her life, Aurelia felt a strange, unfamiliar sensation deep within her chest. It wasn't the thrill of being admired, but something far more potent, a raw, undeniable fascination that he offered no bow, no grand declaration. He simply held her gaze, a faint, knowing smile gracing his lips. It was a smile that promised both untold wonders and profound depths, a smile that seemed to say, I know you. I see you, beyond your glittering facade. And in that moment, Princess Aurelia, the girl who had believed herself the pinnacle of beauty and beyond the grasp of any mere mortal, felt an unprecedented, terrifying, and utterly captivating pull. Her heart, that unyielding crystal, pulsed with a feeling it had never known. She was not just drawn to him, she was irrevocably, profoundly captivated. All her life, she had sought to be adored. Now, for the first time, she felt an overwhelming desire to adore someone else. She did not know, could not know, that the being before her was an amalgam of 200 furious spirits, a living, breathing testament to the anger her pride had wrought. She saw only Kale, the embodiment of a beauty that overshadowed her own, a mystery that promised to finally ignite the dormant embers of her soul. And she was falling. Falling fast, and with a breathtaking, terrifying joy. The unveiling of a different heart. From the moment Princess Aurelia's eyes met Kale's, the carefully constructed world of Eldoria, and indeed her very perception of herself, began to unravel. The grand palace, once her glorious stage, now felt confining. The endless mirror reflections, once her sole companions, seemed dull and lifeless compared to the enigmatic depths of Kale's gaze. Her past cruelties, once a source of amusement, now struck her with a faint, unsettling echo of regret she couldn't quite place. She found herself, for the first time, seeking out another's presence with an eagerness that astonished her ladies-in-waiting and bewildered her father, King Theron. Aurelia, who had never deigned to visit the common folk, now made daily excursions to the village, drawn by an invisible, unbreakable thread to Cale. He was unlike any man she had ever encountered. He didn't shower her with compliments. He merely looked at her, a profound, penetrating gaze that seemed to strip away her artifice and see something deeper. He rarely spoke of himself, yet his few words were woven with an ancient wisdom, offering perspectives that subtly challenged her ingrained arrogance that he never praised her beauty directly, but rather would remark on the play of light in her hair, or the unique curve of her hand, making her feel seen in a way that transcended superficial adoration. "The sun," he once murmured, his voice a low, resonant melody, as they sat by the river, "illuminates all, yet it judges none. Only through accepting every shadow can one truly appreciate its warmth." Aurelia, who had spent her life chasing only light, found herself pondering his words for hours. Cale's charm was not overt, it was insidious, weaving itself into the very fabric of her being. He didn't perform grand gestures, instead, he offered moments of profound, unsettling connection. He would listen intently when she spoke, not with the feigned interest of a suitor, but with a genuine, almost hungry absorption. He made her feel as if her thoughts, her burgeoning feelings, were the most fascinating things in the world. For the first time, Aurelia felt a vulnerability she had never known, a desire to truly be understood, and, most shocking of all, a desperate need to please another. She found herself softening, her sharp tongue less keen, her haughty demeanor replaced by a quiet awe whenever Cale was near. She began to genuinely smile, a real smile that reached her eyes, a phenomenon her own court had rarely witnessed. She even found herself, on occasion, offering a genuine word of kindness to a servant or a fleeting moment of consideration to a commoner, acts utterly foreign to her nature just weeks prior. King Theron watched these changes with a mixture of hope and deep unease. He saw the genuine light in his daughter's eyes, a warmth he had always longed for. But there was something about Cale that pricked at his paternal instincts. The man was too perfect, too serene, almost unreal. He had no family, no past he would speak of, and his presence seemed to hum with an ancient energy that King Theron couldn't quite decipher. Villagers spoke of strange whispers in the woods at night, of shadows that seemed to stretch longer than they should, of an unusual chill in the air even on sunny days. But when the king pressed Aurelia, she merely dismissed his concerns as old-fashioned worries. "Father," she'd say, her eyes shining, "you simply don't understand. Cale is different. He's destiny." The bond between Aurelia and Cale deepened with startling speed. Every conversation was a revelation, every touch a spark. He never declared his love with grand words, but his eyes promised an eternity, his presence enveloped her in a security she had never known. She believed, with all the fervor of her newly awakened heart, that she had found her true soulmate, the one being in all the world worthy of her, and she, finally, worthy of him. The crystal heart that had once been cold and impenetrable now pulsed with a searing, intoxicating flame. Yet, despite the consuming fire of her love, subtle anomalies began to surface, moments that, had Aurelia not been so utterly enthralled, would have chilled her to the bone. Cale never seemed to eat or sleep. He was always perfectly composed, perfectly still, even after hours of conversation. His reflection in water was sometimes a beat behind his movement, or seemed to shimmer slightly. Once, a small bird, normally fearless, flew near them and then, inexplicably, dropped dead at their feet. Cale simply smiled, a remote, detached expression on his face, and changed the subject. The most unnerving incidents occurred when others displeased Aurelia, even mildly. A lady-in-waiting who accidentally spilled tea on her gown suddenly found herself afflicted with a mysterious, crippling tremor in her hands. A stable boy who made an ill-timed joke about Cale's silent nature developed a terrible, festering rash. Aurelia, lost in her infatuation, barely noticed, or perhaps, subtly attributed these misfortunes to her own burgeoning powers of silent disapproval. She didn't connect them to Kale. But Kale knew. He was merely observing the effects of his true nature, the insidious reach of the 200 spirits of wrath that resided within him. They reveled in the chaos, in the subtle manipulations, in the slow, inevitable tightening of the noose around Aurelia's heart. Their anger, the very essence of his being, fed on her vulnerability, on her growing dependence, on the complete surrender of her once indomitable will. Aurelia was blind to these dark undercurrents. She saw only the man who had humbled her pride, awakened her heart, and shown her a love she never believed possible. She felt transformed, reborn. She was falling, deeper and deeper, into a love so absolute it consumed her every thought. And the demon, cloaked in the irresistible beauty of Kale, watched her with those twilight eyes, his subtle smile never leaving his lips. The final act of their ancient, vengeful play was drawing near. The days flowed into weeks, marked by Princess Aurelia's utter devotion to Kale. Her transformation was startling. The haughty princess who had once reveled in others' humiliation was now gentle, almost fragile, in Kale's presence. She had cast aside her vanity, no longer caring for jewels or gowns, her only adornment the soft blush on her cheeks when he smiled at her. King Theron, though still wary, found himself hopeful. Perhaps this mysterious Kale was the catalyst for the daughter he'd always wished for. But the subtle anomalies continued, growing more frequent and more pronounced. The wilting of flowers in Kale's wake, the inexplicable chill that settled in a room when he entered, the faint, disquieting echoes of whispers that only Aurelia seemed to hear when they were alone, like a chorus of barely audible voices murmuring just beyond her understanding. She dismissed them as nervous imaginings, side effects of a love so powerful it rattled her very senses. The full moon, a shimmering disk in the night sky, brought with it a disquieting change. Kale became more withdrawn, his eyes taking on a deeper, more profound darkness. He spoke in riddles, his voice laced with an ancient melancholy. Aurelia, blinded by her love, saw this as charming eccentricity, a depth she was privileged to witness. One evening, as the moonlight streamed through the palace windows, casting long, dancing shadows, Kale led Aurelia to the royal garden. The air was heavy with the scent of night-blooming jasmine, but beneath it, Aurelia detected a faint, earthy odor she couldn't quite place. A prickle of unease, unfamiliar and fleeting, touched her. Kale turned to her, his twilight eyes shining with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Aurelia," he murmured, his voice a silken caress, "you have given me a heart I thought lost to eternity. You have loved me, truly, and with a purity that transcends mortal understanding." Aurelia's heart swelled with joy. "And you, my Kale, have given me life. I was but a reflection before you." A faint, knowing smile played on Kale's lips, a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Indeed. And reflections, dear Aurelia, must always face the truth of what they are. Do you remember the tears of the princes you scorned? The shame of the senators' sons you ridiculed? The heartbreak of those who dared to offer you their sincere affection, only to be cast aside for your own perceived perfection?" Aurelia's brow furrowed. The words, once so dismissive, now felt like tiny barbs. "They were unworthy," she whispered, though the conviction in her voice faltered. Kale's smile widened, a chilling, triumphant curve that twisted his beautiful features into something subtly menacing. "Unworthy? Or merely not you? You, who believed yourself so flawless, so beyond reproach. You, who took such delight in breaking the spirits of others." His voice began to deepen, subtly, resonating with a power that vibrated in the very air. "Your pride, Aurelia, did not just wound mortals. It offended the very essence of the land, the ancient spirits who watched over Eldoria. And they grew very, very angry." As he spoke, the shadows in the garden began to lengthen and writhe, no longer merely dancing, but seeming to solidify, to reach. A cold wind swept through the garden, though no breeze stirred the trees. Aurelia shivered, a true, deep chill that had nothing to do with the night air. They coalesced, Kale continued, his voice now a chorus of whispers that seemed to emanate from all around them, 200 vengeful spirits, each a fragment of the wrath you unknowingly provoked. They pooled their anger, their indignation, their desire for balance, and they sought a vessel. Aurelia's eyes widened in dawning horror. The whispers she'd heard, the odd sensations, the sudden misfortunes of those around her. Kale stepped closer, his hand reaching out, no longer tender but possessive, his fingers like icy tendrils. And I, princess, am that vessel. I am the manifestation of their collective fury. I am the culmination of every insult, every rejection, every broken heart you caused. His eyes, those beautiful twilight pools, suddenly swirled, revealing glimpses of countless angry, ancient depths within them. His perfect features shimmered, fleetingly, as if briefly overlaid by 200 other faces, angry, pained, resentful. The elegant lines of his dark cloak seemed to ripple with unseen movement, as if myriad forms struggled just beneath its surface. You sought perfection, Aurelia, and you found it. In me. The perfect consequence for your perfect cruelty. His grip tightened on her arm, cold and unyielding. You loved me, princess. You, who could not love another. You, who saw yourself as above all. You fell for the very embodiment of your own reckoning, not knowing I was the judgment you brought upon yourself. A wave of profound dread washed over Aurelia, colder and more terrifying than any physical chill. The love that had bloomed so brightly in her heart now twisted into a sickening terror. The man she adored, the one who had finally pierced her pride, was not a man at all. He was a demon, born of her own egregious arrogance, sent to claim her. Tears, real tears, streamed down her face for the first time in memory, tears not of vanity or frustration, but of pure, unadulterated fear and a crushing, agonizing realization. She had loved him deeply, blindly, unknowingly, and in doing so, she had sealed her own fate. The spirits, through Kale, had ensured she would experience the deepest, most consuming love, only to have it revealed as the very instrument of her fall. No, she choked out, the word barely a whisper, as the shadows around them seemed to press in, growing darker, colder, alive. Kale's smile was now a full, terrifying rictus of triumph, revealing teeth that seemed just a little too sharp in the moonlight. Oh, yes, Aurelia. You see, the most beautiful girl on earth can still be brought to her knees. And sometimes, the most beautiful love, is merely a beautiful cage. The garden, once a place of sweet fragrance and moonlit beauty, transformed into a realm of encroaching shadow. Aurelia screamed, a sound that tore through the night, a sound of utter despair and crushing realization. But it was a scream lost to the growing darkness, consumed by the silent, vengeful chorus of 200 spirits, finally claiming their due. The piercing scream of Princess Aurelia, a sound that shattered the serene night air, was not merely one of terror. It was the cry of a soul confronting its deepest fears, of a heart breaking not from sorrow, but from the brutal collision of absolute love with absolute deception. As Kale, the beautiful demon, revealed his true, manifold nature, the garden was no longer merely a garden. It became a theater for a very personal, very chilling judgment. Kale's form solidified, yet simultaneously seemed to ripple with the countless energies within him. The individual features of his face blurred for an instant, a fleeting glimpse of 200 distinct emotions, rage, sorrow, vengeance, and a cold, ancient satisfaction. His eyes, the mesmerizing twilight pools that had ensnared Aurelia's heart, now burned with a triumphant malevolence. They held no warmth, no affection, only the chilling reflection of her own horrified face. You sought to be the sole star, Aurelia, Kale's voice boomed, no longer a silken whisper but a resonant chorus of many voices, echoing from the very air, and in your brilliance, you cast others into unforgivable shadow. But even the brightest star eventually burns out, consumed by its own fire. His grasp on her arm tightened, not with the bruising force of a human, but with an otherworldly chill that seeped into her bones, freezing her from the inside out. Aurelia tried to pull away, to run, but her limbs felt heavy, unresponsive, as if rooted to the spot. Her mind, once so sharp and arrogant, was now a whirlwind of terror and disbelief. The love she had nurtured, cherished, and surrendered to utterly, had become the most potent weapon against her. "This is not just punishment, Aurelia," Cale continued, his voice a chilling blend of accusation and perverse satisfaction. "This is a lesson. A lesson in humility, in empathy, in the true cost of unbridled pride. You made others feel small, insignificant, and ugly. Now, you will know what it truly means to be consumed." As he spoke, the shadows around them no longer merely writhed. They began to coalesce, reaching out like shadowy tendrils, creeping up Aurelia's legs, climbing her body. They were cold, suffocating, a silent, encroaching darkness that mirrored the despair blossoming in her heart. She could feel a strange pressure, a sense of being compressed, absorbed. King Theron, awakened by Aurelia's initial scream, rushed into the garden, his old eyes wide with fear and confusion. He saw his daughter, frozen in place, surrounded by an impossible, living darkness, her face contorted in a silent scream. He saw Cale, his form subtly shifting, his eyes glowing with an unnatural light. "Aurelia," the king cried, reaching out a trembling hand. But Cale merely turned his head, and his eyes, now fully infused with the power of the 200, locked onto the king. A wave of unseen force slammed into King Theron, throwing him backward, rendering him unconscious before he could utter another word. This act was not out of malice towards the king, but merely a necessary removal of an obstacle. The spirit's focus was solely on Aurelia. The shadowy tendrils enveloped Aurelia completely, covering her mouth, her eyes, until all she could see was the encroaching blackness, all she could feel was the icy grip of countless unseen hands. There was no pain, not physically, but an agonizing sensation of dissolution. She felt her essence being drawn out, her individual consciousness blurring, merging with the cold, ancient anger that was Cale. She remembered every cruel word, every dismissive glance, every shattered hope she had inflicted upon her suitors. Each memory was a pinprick, a tiny fragment of guilt magnified 1,000-fold, each feeding the power that was consuming her. Her beauty, once her greatest asset, became utterly irrelevant in the face of this overwhelming, spiritual force. The last thing Aurelia heard, before the darkness fully claimed her, was Cale's voice, now a solemn, final pronouncement, devoid of all mirth: "May your heart, once so cold, finally understand the warmth of connection. And may your spirit, once so proud, know the humility of true belonging." Then, silence. The oppressive shadows in the garden receded, melting back into the night. Cale stood alone, his form once again perfectly human, perfectly beautiful, utterly serene. His eyes held only a distant, knowing calm. There was no trace of Aurelia. No body, no gown, no shimmering hair. She was gone. Not dead, but absorbed, her essence added to the vast, complex tapestry of the 200 spirits, a new voice in their eternal chorus, a perpetual reminder of the lesson learned. King Theron awoke hours later, disoriented and heartbroken. The garden was peaceful, the moon had set, and the first blush of dawn painted the sky. But his daughter was nowhere to be found. Search parties were launched, the kingdom was scoured, but Princess Aurelia had vanished without a trace, as if she had never existed. King Theron spent the rest of his days a shadowed man, haunted by the memory of her last scream and the unsettling beauty of the stranger who had come to Eldoria. From that day forward, the kingdom of Eldoria spoke of the whispering woods, where the wind carried faint, melodic sighs and warnings against pride. They spoke of the princess who loved only herself, and how she was taken by a love so profound it was terrifying. And sometimes, on moonless nights, a lone, ethereal figure could be glimpsed deep within the woods, eyes like twilight, watching the slumbering kingdom, a silent guardian of a very harsh, eternal lesson. The ultimate fate of Aurelia was not death, but a chilling form of immortality, to exist forever as a part of the entity she loved, a spirit among the 200, her once proud heart now beating in unison with the ancient wrath, eternally reminded of the consequences of her past. Her beauty had been her cage, and her pride, the key that locked her within. We've come to the end of the story. What did you learn? Please kindly drop your thought and lesson in the comments section, and please don't forget to subscribe, share and comment. Thank you and God bless you.